Okay, going to talk about pipetters today. Despite the fact that they look really simple and not very complex at all, they are rather expensive. Each one of these runs right around 500 bucks or so. There's a couple of different features that we're going to talk about them today. First of all, there's a label. Make sure that you are paying attention to which size pipetter you grab. That one there says 20 to 200 microliters. A microliter is 1 millionth of a liter. So you have liters, milliliters, then microliters. This one will dispense anywhere from 20 to 200 microliters. So it's relatively precise and accurate at doing that, which is what makes them kind of expensive. You can change the amount of dispensing by turning a dial. That's a black dial there in the middle. And then that changes up the amount of volume. So there's 29, there's 30. Notice that there's little tick marks in between. That also is very, very accurate. So make sure that you know exactly how much you're dispensing. Today we're going to set this thing for 20. So we're going to dial that one back down. One of the first things that you need to know how to do is to put a pipette tip on. There will be a yellow bag with pipette tips in it. The pipette tips that we use today, it's not that important, but we're going to get in the habit of doing this. We're going to try to not touch the pipette tips because then you're going to contaminate your samples. So grab onto a pipette tip outside of the bag, work it onto the tip of that thing. Then you can grab the pipette tip on the outside and snug it onto the end of the tip. Okay. There is an ejector for getting rid of the pipette tip. That's back there. That's that little white button. And then go ahead and push that, and then that pops the pipette tip off. Again, for today, it's really not going to matter too much, but overall, the concept is that if you're going through a bunch of these different samples, every time that you switch samples, you want to change the pipette tips. So rather important to keep that idea in mind. There are two different plunger settings on this thing. I'll pick up the other one and show you that. I'll call it stage 1 and stage 2, or setting 1 and setting 2. So there's when the thing is fully extended, it's out to the top. Then you're going to push it down a little bit, and you'll sense it stop, and that's going to be setting 1. And then there's going to be a second depth to that you can push it down a little bit more, and then that'll stop you there. Those two different plunger settings are important for making sure that you do this correctly. Okay, so we are going to practice this with a little bit of food coloring today. The food coloring that we'll use is either red or blue or yellow or green, whatever you end up with, it doesn't really matter. We're going to grab a pipette tip here. We're going to start out at 20 microliters, so make sure that your pipette is set to 20, and then go ahead, and the idea here is that you want to start out by pushing down on the plunger to the first stage outside of the sample, so just out in the air. Then you're going to put the pipette tip down into the sample. Make sure that you're not just on the very tip of the sample, that you're in the sample, and then you're going to let go of the pipette plunger and let it suck up. You should be able to remove your thumb at this point, lift out, and the sample should be in there. That's 20 microliters of stuff. Then you guys are going to practice kind of a steady hand here. Uh-oh, the water's moving. Going to practice steady hand here, and we're going to plunge the stuff into the water and try to keep it as small of a spot as possible. So the way you do that is you put the pipette tip into the sample, put it all the way to the bottom of the tray. Then you're going to depress the plunger to the first stage, and that should make a dot down there. And then you're going to press it all the way down and plunge it to the second stage. All the way down, so everything's out of there. And then holding it there, you're going to lift the whole pipetter out of the sample, and then slowly back on off of there. Notice that this stuff kind of lifts up in the pipette as you lift off slowly. Very, very big important piece of information here is to make sure that you do not want to have any of that blue dye or anything, any of your sample get sucked up into the pipette. It'll ruin the pipette, it'll contaminate every sample from there on out, it'll make it a problem. Now, since we've just used blue dye, and that was pretty well done, we've used blue dye, and we're going to use blue dye again. We don't need to switch the tip, but if you're going to use a different sample, then you'd want to eject the tip and move on to the different sample. One of the other no-nos is, as I just said, don't let go of that plunger at any point in time so that it sucks the stuff back up into the pipetter. And the other thing is, don't ever hold that thing horizontally or upside down. Always hold the pipettes vertically. So rather important, otherwise you will damage these things, and again, they're rather expensive to replace. That's it.